My name is Lorene, and I'm 73 years old. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would tell a love story at my age, but here I am, sitting in my daughter's kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon, watching the autumn leaves spiral past the window. And I realize that some stories demand to be told. Not because they're extraordinary, though mine surprised me in ways I still can't quite explain, but because they're true. And truth, I've learned, is the rarest gift we can offer one another. For 41 years, I was married to a good man named Richard. He died 6 years ago, on a Wednesday morning in March, while reading the newspaper at our breakfast table. The doctor said his heart simply stopped, like a clock that had run its course. After his funeral, I promised myself I would be fine. I had my children, my grandchildren, my book club, my volunteer work at the library. I had a life that looked full from the outside. And most days, I convinced myself it was enough. But here's what no one tells you about grief. It doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in waves, yes, but more than that, it settles into the quiet spaces of your daily routine, like dust on forgotten shelves. It's in the Sunday mornings when you automatically brew 2 cups of coffee. It's in the way you still sleep on your side of the bed, even though the other side has been empty for years. It's in the realization that you've been speaking less and less because there's no one waiting to hear your thoughts at the end of the day. I thought that part of my life was over. The part where someone knows how you take your tea, remembers the stories you've already told, notices when you've changed your hair. I thought, at 73, you make peace with your memories, and you wait, gracefully, for whatever comes next. I was wrong. This is a story about what happened when I stopped waiting. It began, of all places, in a hardware store on a Saturday morning in June. I'd gone there to buy a new lock for my garden shed. The old one had rusted through after last winter's storms. I was standing in the aisle, staring at what seemed like hundreds of identical silver locks, when I heard a voice beside me. "The one on the left is better." I turned to see a man about my age, maybe a few years older, with silver hair that looked like it had given up trying to be tamed decades ago. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and a faded denim shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His eyes were kind, the first thing I noticed about him, and there was a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "How do you know?" I asked, more curtly than I intended. I've never liked being told what to do, even when I clearly needed direction. "I've been a carpenter for 47 years, he said, not at all put off by my tone. "Installed more locks than I can count. That one," he pointed to the one I'd been reaching for, "looks solid, but the mechanism is prone to freezing in winter. This one," he tapped the package to the left, "costs $3 more, but will last you 20 years. I looked at him more carefully then. His hands were large and scarred, the hands of someone who'd spent a lifetime working with them. There was a wedding ring on his left hand, I noticed, worn thin and scratched. "Thank you," I said, taking the lock he'd recommended. "That's very helpful." He nodded and turned to leave, then paused and turned back. "Forgive me for asking, but are you installing it yourself?" Something in my chest tightened. I thought of Richard, who had always handled these things. "I am," I said, lifting my chin slightly. "Good for you," he said, and I could tell he meant it. "If you need any help, I'm usually here on Saturday mornings. Name's Wendell." He extended his hand. I shook it. His palm was rough and warm. "Lorene." "Nice to meet you, Lorene." He walked away then, and I stood in the aisle holding my lock, feeling strangely unsettled. It was the first time in 6 years that a man who wasn't my son-in-law had treated me like a person, not a widow. There was no pity in his eyes, no carefulness in his voice, just straightforward kindness. I bought the lock and went home. I told myself I'd forget about him by Monday, but I didn't forget. Over the next 2 weeks, I found myself thinking about that brief encounter at odd moments, while folding laundry, while weeding the garden, while lying awake at 3 in the morning, listening to the house settle around me. It wasn't romantic interest, not yet, anyway. It was something else, a reminder, perhaps, that I was still capable of being seen, that I could still have a conversation with a stranger that didn't revolve around my late husband, or my children's lives, or my gradually failing joints. When the hinge on my kitchen cabinet broke, 3 weeks later, I told myself I was being practical. The hardware store was the obvious place to go. The fact that it was a Saturday morning was pure coincidence. I found him in the plumbing section, studying pipe fittings with the kind of concentration most people reserve for important documents. "Hello, Wendell." He looked up, and I watched recognition dawn in his eyes, followed by what looked like genuine pleasure. "Lorene, did the lock work out for you?" "Perfectly," I said. "Thank you again for the advice. I'm here for a cabinet hinge now. I don't suppose you have opinions about those, too." He laughed, a warm, rusty sound, like he didn't do it often enough. "As a matter of fact, I do. Come on, I'll show you." We walked to the hardware aisle together, and he explained the differences between various hinges with the kind of patience that comes from truly knowing your subject. As we talked, I learned that he'd retired from carpentry 5 years ago, after a bout of arthritis made it too painful to work with his hands all day. His wife had died 7 years ago. Cancer, he said simply, without elaboration. He had 2 daughters, both living out of state, and he'd sold the house he'd shared with his wife because it had become too full of memories. "Does that make me a coward?" he asked as we stood at the checkout counter. "Running from memories?" I thought about it carefully. "I think it makes you honest," I said finally. "Sometimes staying is brave. Sometimes leaving is brave. It depends on what you need to survive." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I felt something shift in the air between us. "Would you like to get a cup of coffee?" he asked. "There's a diner across the street. Their coffee is terrible, but the company might make up for it." I should have said no. I should have made an excuse about errands or grandchildren or any of the 100 other things I used to fill my days. But I found myself saying, "I'd like that." The diner was exactly as he described. Worn vinyl booths, laminate tables that had seen better decades, and coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the first Bush administration. We sat in a booth by the window, and for the first few minutes, we talked about nothing important. The weather, the town, the way everything seemed to be changing too fast these days. But then, Wendell said something that caught me off guard. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" I nodded, wrapping my hands around my coffee cup. "I'm lonely," he said simply. "I know I'm supposed to say I'm doing fine, that retirement is wonderful, that I love having all this free time, and some of it is true. But mostly, I'm lonely. I wake up lonely. I eat breakfast lonely. I go to the hardware store on Saturday mornings because at least there, I'm lonely around other people." The honesty of it took my breath away. In 6 years, no one had said anything like this to me. Everyone asked how I was doing, but no one wanted the real answer. They wanted to hear that I was fine, that I was adjusting, that I was grateful for my memories. "I'm lonely too," I heard myself say, "and I'm angry about it. I had my life. I had my person. It's not fair that I have to figure out how to be alone at 73, when all I want is to sit on the porch in the evening and tell someone about my day." His eyes were bright behind his glasses. "That's exactly it. The small stuff. That's what I miss most. Someone to notice when you get a haircut," I said. "Someone to argue with about which route to take to the grocery store," he added. "Someone to watch Jeopardy with, even though you both know all the answers anyway." We sat there, 2 old people in a dingy diner, cataloging the tiny intimacies of long marriages. And something happened that I didn't expect. I started to laugh. Not polite, quiet laughter, but the real kind. The kind that comes from your belly and makes your eyes water. Wendell laughed too. And suddenly, the whole situation seemed absurd and wonderful, and somehow exactly right. "This is the strangest coffee date I've ever been on," I said when I caught my breath. "Is that what this is?" Wendell asked, his eyes twinkling. "A date?" I paused, considering. At 73, what was the point of playing games? "I don't know," I said honestly. "What would you like it to be?" He reached across the table and placed his hand, palm up, in the middle. An invitation, not a demand. I looked at that hand, scarred, weathered, real, and I thought about all the years I'd told myself I was done with this, that I'd had my chance at love and I should be grateful for what I'd had. But sitting there in that terrible diner, looking at this man who was brave enough to admit he was lonely, I realized something important. Being grateful for what you've had doesn't mean you have to stop hoping for what might come next. I put my hand in his. Absolutely not. My daughter Rebecca stood in my kitchen, her arms crossed, her face set in that expression I remembered from her teenage years, when I'd refused to let her do something she desperately wanted. Except now, the roles were reversed. I was the one who wanted something, and she was the one saying no. "Rebecca, Mom, you barely know this man. You've met him twice. Twice! And now you're telling me you're, what, dating him?" "We've been seeing each other for 6 weeks," I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. "I wanted to wait before telling you, to make sure it was something real." "6 weeks?" Her voice rose. "You've been lying to me for 6 weeks?" "I haven't been lying. I simply didn't mention it." "That's the same thing." I took a deep breath. This was the conversation I'd been dreading since that first coffee date with Wendell. I'd known my children would have opinions, strong ones, but I'd hoped for understanding, not this. "Rebecca," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I know this is unexpected, but I'm asking you to trust me." "Trust you?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mom, you're 73 years old. What if he's after your money? What if he's just lonely and you're convenient? What if he makes me happy?" I interrupted. "What if for the first time in 6 years, I don't feel like I'm just going through the motions? What if I actually look forward to tomorrow?" She stopped, her mouth half open, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. "I can't lose you too," she whispered. "I can't watch someone else hurt you." And there it was, not anger, fear. I went to her and took her hands. "Sweetheart, I know you're trying to protect me, and I love you for it. But I need you to understand something." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "When your father died, a part of me died too. I thought that was it. I thought I'd used up my allotment of love and joy and partnership, and the rest of my life would just be maintenance. Maintaining my house, maintaining my health, maintaining relationships. Just holding steady until the end. Mom, let me finish. Wendell isn't replacing your father. No one could. But he's giving me a reason to want tomorrow, not just accept it. Is that really so terrible?" Rebecca was crying now, and so was I. She pulled me into a hug, and we stood there in my kitchen, two women who loved each other enough to be honest about their fears. "I'm scared," she said against my shoulder. "So am I admitted. Terrified, actually. But I'm also happy. Can you try to be happy for me?" She pulled back and looked at me. Really looked at me, and I saw the moment she decided to let go. "Okay," she said. "Okay, but I want to meet him, soon." "This Sunday," I said. "Dinner. I'll make pot roast." "He better be worth it," she said, but she was almost smiling. Over the next months, I learned Wendell in the way you learn a new language, slowly, with occasional misunderstandings, but with growing fluency. I learned that he woke at 5:30 every morning, a habit from 47 years of carpentry jobs that started at dawn. I learned that he was hopeless at cooking, but excellent at cleaning up. I learned that he read mysteries before bed and always figured out who did it by chapter 3, but read to the end anyway because he enjoyed the journey. I learned that he'd built the house he'd lived in with his wife, board by board, room by room, over the course of 30 years. I learned that leaving it had nearly broken him, but staying would have finished the job. I learned that he loved his daughters fiercely, but didn't know how to talk to them about anything important. I learned that he'd been present for every school play and soccer game and parent-teacher conference, but he'd never once told them he loved them out loud, assuming they knew. "Do they know?" I asked one evening as we sat on my porch, watching the sunset. He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "I hope so, but I don't know." "You should tell them," I said. "What if it's too late?" It's never too late for the truth. I learned that his wife, Marion, had been a high school English teacher, that she'd corrected his grammar until the day she died, and that he'd loved her for it, that she'd left him 47 letters, sealed and numbered, with instructions to open one each week after she was gone, that he'd opened the last one 5 years ago, and it had said simply, "You're allowed to be happy again. I mean it, Wendell. Don't waste the time you have left." "Did you believe her?" I asked. "Not until I met you," he said. "We had our first fight on a Tuesday in October. It started over something small. Oh, doesn't it always? He'd made plans for us to go to dinner with a couple he knew without asking me first. I'd had a long day, I was tired, and I didn't want to make small talk with strangers. I wanted to stay home with a book and a cup of tea. "I don't understand why you're upset," he said, confusion and frustration in his voice. "It's just dinner." "It's not about the dinner," I said. "It's about the fact that you made plans for me without asking. I'm not your wife, Wendell. You don't get to make decisions for me." The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. The look on his face, hurt, closed off, made me want to take them back. "You're right," he said quietly. "You're not my wife. I apologize for forgetting that." He left after that, and I sat in my living room, shaking with anger and regret in equal measure. I'd spent 41 years learning Richard's rhythms, understanding his unspoken assumptions, building a life that fit together like interlocking pieces. The idea of starting over, of learning someone new, suddenly felt exhausting. But then I thought about what I'd told Rebecca, that Wendell gave me a reason to want tomorrow. Was that still true when tomorrow included misunderstandings and hurt feelings and the hard work of building something new? I picked up the phone and called him. "I'm sorry," I said when he answered. "That came out wrong. What I meant was, I spent 41 years in a partnership where we made decisions together, and I need that. I need to be asked, not told, even about small things, especially about small things." There was silence on the other end. Then, "I'm sorry too. You're right. I got used to making decisions for two people, and I forgot that you're not Marion. You're Lorene, and Lorene needs to be asked. Lorene also needs to remember that Wendell is trying his best just like she is," I said. "Are we okay?" he asked. "We're learning," I said. "That's better than okay." Here's what no one tells you about falling in love after 60. It's harder and easier than you expect, often at the same time. It's harder because you'll come with decades of habits, preferences, and assumptions about how things should be done. You've spent years perfecting your morning routine, your side of the bed, your approach to loading the dishwasher. The idea of compromising on these things feels like giving up pieces of yourself. It's harder because you carry your losses with you. Every time Wendell called me by Marion's name by accident, which happened twice in the first month, it reminded us both that we were building something new on the foundation of something lost. It's harder because your children watch you with worried eyes, waiting for you to get hurt. Because your friends have opinions. Because the world seems to think there's something vaguely unseemly about senior citizens holding hands in public. But it's easier, so much easier, because you know who you are. You're not trying to impress anyone or be someone you're not. You're not worried about whether he'll like your friends or whether his family will approve or whether you should wait 3 days to call him back. You're 73 years old, and you've earned the right to be exactly who you are. It's easier because you understand the value of what you're building. You know the time is precious because you've seen how quickly it passes. You don't take good mornings for granted. You don't waste evenings on petty arguments. You say, "I love you," because you know there's no guarantee you'll get another chance. It's easier because you've learned that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who's willing to be imperfect alongside you. Someone who'll hold your hand during the scary parts and laugh with you during the absurd parts and show up day after day, even when it's hard. Wendell wasn't perfect. He left cupboard doors open. He interrupted my stories. He needed everything explained twice, and sometimes 3 times. He was stubborn and proud, and occasionally oblivious. But he brought me coffee in bed every Saturday morning. He noticed when I was quiet and asked when I was thinking. He held my hand during scary movies, even though I was the one who'd insisted on watching them. He called his daughters and told them he loved them, and cried afterward because he'd waited so long to say it. And when I woke up at 3 in the morning, afraid of everything and nothing, he was there, not fixing it, not telling me it would be okay, just there. That was everything. Wendell proposed on a Thursday afternoon in March, 9 months after we met in the hardware store. We were sitting in his truck in the parking lot of a medical building. I'd just finished an appointment with my oncologist, a routine follow-up for the breast cancer I'd beaten 12 years earlier. The news was good, but the appointment had shaken me anyway. It always did. "Marry me," Wendell said. I turned to look at him. He was staring straight ahead through the windshield, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "What?" "Marry me," he said again. "I know we're old. I know people will think we're crazy. I know we don't have decades ahead of us like we did the first time around. But I don't want to waste another day pretending this is casual. I love you, Lorene. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to figure out whose house we'll live in and argue about whose furniture is better and learn to compromise on how to load the dishwasher. I want the mess of it, the hard parts, all of it." He finally turned to look at me, and I saw that he was crying. "I'm 77 years old," he continued. "I've got arthritis in my hands and high blood pressure and a knee that aches when it rains. I snore. I repeat myself. I'm not the man I was at 30 or 40 or even 50, but I love you with everything I've got left, and I don't want to waste whatever time we have being careful or protecting ourselves or doing the sensible thing. Say yes." I thought about Rebecca's fears, about the voices in my head that said I was too old for this, that I'd had my chance at marriage, that I should be content with what I had, about all the practical reasons why this was a terrible idea. And then I thought about that morning, 9 months ago, in the hardware store, how Wendell had seen me, not a widow, not someone to be pitied, but a person. How he'd made me want to laugh again. How he'd reminded me that I was still here, still alive, still capable of tomorrow. "Yes," I said. We were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the courthouse, with Rebecca and my son, Wendell's daughters, and a handful of close friends. I wore a simple blue dress, Richard's favorite color. Wendell wore a suit that looked like it had last seen daylight in 1997. When the judge asked if we took each other for better or worse, in sickness and in health, until death do us part, I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. We were 73 and 77. Sickness was inevitable. Death was coming, but we were promising anyway. That's the thing about love after 60. You make the promise, knowing you can't keep it forever. You make it anyway, because sometimes the promise is more important than the outcome. I'm writing this 3 years after that first morning in the hardware store. Wendell is in the next room reading another mystery, and I can hear him muttering to himself about plot holes. In a few minutes, I'll make tea, and we'll sit on the porch and watch the evening come in. We ended up selling both our houses and buying a small ranch-style place together. It was hard, letting go of the house Richard and I had raised our children in. But it was also freeing. This house is ours, Wendell's and mine, built on compromise and decorated with pieces from both our old lives. Rebecca and I are still working on our relationship. She's trying to understand. I'm trying to be patient. We're both learning that love isn't finite, that loving Wendell doesn't diminish what I had with Richard, any more than loving my second child diminished my load for my first. Wendell's daughters visited for Thanksgiving. They cried when they saw how happy their father was. We cried with them. Here was a lot of crying. If I could go back and tell my 73-year-old self, the one standing in the hardware store, afraid and lonely and certain that part of her life was over, what I know now, here's what I'd say. It's not over. Not even close. You're allowed to be happy again. You're allowed to want more than memories. You're allowed to make mistakes and take risks and fall in love like a teenager, even though your joints ache and you can't remember where you put your reading glasses. You're allowed to miss what you lost and embrace what you find. You're allowed to honor your past and build your future. You're allowed to be grateful and greedy at the same time. You're allowed to be scared, but don't let fear make your decisions. And most importantly, it's never too late. For love, for joy, for starting over, for saying yes. Never. The lock Wendell recommended that day is still on my old garden shed. Rebecca lives there now. We gave her the house when Wendell and I moved. Every time I visit and see that lock, I think about how one small moment of kindness from a stranger in a hardware store changed everything. We don't know how much time we have left. Maybe 10 years. Maybe 5. Maybe 20 if we're very lucky. But whatever time we get, we'll spend it together. Arguing about dishwashers, reading mysteries, drinking terrible coffee, learning each other, living. That's what love after 60 looks like. Not perfect, not easy, but real, and worth every complicated, messy, beautiful moment. My name is Lorene, and I'm 76 years old. I'm sitting on my porch on a Thursday evening, watching the sunset with my husband. In a minute, I'll go inside and start dinner. But right now, I'm just here, present in this moment, grateful for second chances. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart or made you think about second chances in your own life, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel and leave a comment below. Share your own story of love, loss, or new beginnings. I read every comment, and your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Remember, it's never too late to start again.